Good afternoon. Welcome to the afternoon session of day 2.
Good afternoon.
Yes. So, would we start with some reflection?
I think, should I start?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think it was too deep for me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so continuous thoughts are popping up, and I hope it's normal for a person to go through this phase.
Yes.
So it's kind of a turmoil. I don't know which all these thoughts are coming up, and which I didn't expect, obviously. So I mean, I didn't know that this something like this can happen. So again, maybe it's, as you said, suppressed things which are surfacing, or that awareness is causing the various thoughts to pop up.
Hmm.
I would like to know more about it.
Yeah, so this is perhaps, we don't know exactly, we cannot conclude that either. But there are chances of getting a lot of conditioning, past conditioning, unshackled. And in this
Correct.
process of unshackling, actually, we may feel innervated, we may experience a lot of draining out. So that's a possibility. I don't know. Binal, do you have any thoughts to share on this?
In this regard, I don't know how would one know whether it's coming from awareness and not from conditioning is another uh, thing.
Which one? The struggling, the sense of struggling, you're saying?
Yeah, whether it's under the purview of awareness or whether it's another form of loop in a different form. Um, is something that I'm skeptical about. I mean, it is for each one to decipher, but
So,
even
so
that deciphering would be
just for
clear.
example, if it is another conditioning, let's say, then what kind of conditioning it could be? You're suspecting?
In the sense that it could be perhaps justification, or it could go into even regret for that matter, that I would not have done that had I known XYZ at that point in time. So, on those lines, it could go, or if it's awareness, then maybe that observation, that even if there is a regret, then maybe even observe that this is what is happening.
Yeah, so Anita, the crux of Binal's proposal is that even if it is a past conditioning that I am able to see, there's no point in getting into any kind of guilt or maybe sometime justification, because that will again another cage in built.
Right.
That aspect is also very important to observe.
Kalyan sir, in what context you are talking? Actually, I joined late, so I am not able to get it.
Many time what happens, this framework of inquiry, when it is introduced for the first time, many time we feel depleted, we feel very overloaded. So we were actually exploring that reason for that overload, that experiencing the overload, that could come from the unshackling of the past conditioning, and that may lead us to another layer of conditioning in form of guilt or justification a casualness that most of the people are having this kind of conditioning, so why not me as well? This kind of justification also may come sometime, which is another burden that we put onto ourselves. So we were actually exploring that thing. Hi, Sapna. Any
Hello,
reflection?
I'm sorry I got a little delayed.
Yes. So any
you.
reflection further?
No, I've been thinking about the inquiry, like this screen itself says what I've been thinking about.
Hmm.
What is inquiry in the real sense? As in what comes to you, how you perceive it in what sense? It will all be based on your past background, how and what your experiences been, and how stagnant interpretation that you
Hmm.
kind of jama kar liya layer by layer by layer. So
Yes.
it's like whether it comes intuitively to you, whether it comes on its own to you, or you have to make a persistent effort into that aspect, or is there, like we say, there are no techniques to it, or there are some techniques to it. I mean, like my mind is buzzing with all
Yes,
of that.
yes. So the same question is on the screen as well. That what
Anji.
is the inquiry in the real sense? Is it a special skill?
Special skill, yeah.
So
Because
if it,
I've gone through Zen meditations, and I've been chanting, reading about Buddhist text scriptures, and I've been years into it. We've been through Vipassana. What you are doing is seems more like on the Vipassana kind. But again, there is sitting down and putting in an effort.
yes.
So I am like exploring, and like my mind is buzzing with all this now.
Yes, technically, Vipassana is very closer to inquiry. Vipassana, if we remove that imposition of practice, daily practice, and all those stories, then the technical aspect of Vipassana, where we are observing without any judgment. We are observing the sensation, the very body sensation, without any judgment. Without any judgment means, be it a good sensation or bad sensation, we are going to the next body point. So this raving through the body sensation is quite in sync with the understanding of inquiry. Just we have to give a discount of this imposition of practice, daily practice, daily routine kind of thing. So, and this aspect is very natural, in us, within us. Observation is a very natural knack. It is not a learned knack. It is not a skill to be learned, but observation is very natural state of being. Just that because of conditioning, our observation get blocked. So here we need to understand the very tone of the inquiry is the agendalessness. Because in the presence of agenda, the observation, which is equivalent to inquiry, cannot happen. Observation is a journey, and agendas are stoppages in the journey. So if we stop in between, then the journey is impacted. Journey cannot be continued if we stop. So agendas linger and attract our energy and stop the journey of observation. So when it is directionless, agenda-less, then it is unconditional, because the agenda or the direction, imposed direction, is a condition being put. So when we are talking about the natural movements, it cannot have a condition, a specific direction to go. It's a pathless process. Pathless movement, rather. A movement, but doesn't have a path.
So Kalyan, is it
Yes,
more
please.
like mindfulness practice that the Buddha taught? Or like
Quite
just
similar.
being aware?
Quite similar. If we just give a discount to that word practice.
Again, that naming, huh?
Yes. It's quite
Okay.
similar. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Quite similar in this. The framework is quite similar, rather. Just that when we just fragment it on the name of practices or methods, then it becomes another condition to put. So this is very common, perhaps, like in case of disease, we have discomfort during disease, but if we do not dive deep in this understanding of disease as a process of healing, then we get impatient about that discomfort, that how to get rid of that discomfort, and we start considering that getting rid of discomfort is not a crime. I have to facilitate this relief from the discomfort. So all those justifications come in, P1 to P3 justifications. So we lead ourselves, we push ourselves to take some initiative to actually ascertain the relief faster. And that's how we end up fragmenting. It's quite similar to that story of a plant. A plant is growing upward. We observe that. We find it very pertinent that the plant is growing upward. Now, on the name of helping the plant to grow faster, if we put a thread around the plant and pull it upward, will it grow faster? Even if it is in the same direction of growth. And the very reason that the plant will be uprooted and die, because the growth that we are seeing may have a specific direction as we interpret, but it has a multi-directional impact in that particular path of growth, which we can never measure, which we can never decipher. So on the very aspect of facilitating a natural movement becomes a condition. Whenever we start proposing that let's facilitate natural movement is a spontaneous movement. Now, if at all some kind of facilitation we devise, that's just our interpretation, another. So observation is observation when there is no agenda in it. If there is an agenda, then observation is directed. It's a biased looking at the things, biased way of looking at the things. Observation is unbiased. And observation is equivalent to inquiry. Now, if inquiry is an innate knack, why is it not generally exercised? This is another question. Generally, we don't see that inquiry conventionally, the human genre, the way it has taken over this planet, we see that inquiring is very limited being executed. So that means there is definitely a suppression of inquiry at play. Now, if it is so, then why does it happen? Why does it happen? Now, for that, we need to understand the very characteristic of organisms in terms of hedonism. The meaning of hedonism is pleasure-seeking behavior of organism. So all the organisms are structurally pleasure-seeking. What does it mean? It's a physically, we are seeking pleasure always. Because that pleasure means we are getting nutrient. That pleasure means we are getting sunlight. That pleasure means we are getting the needful sound, needful touch, and all those information, the receiving of the information. Now, the pleasure is the voice of the organism which actually direct us or guide us whether to continue accepting the information from the outside world. This is common for all the organisms. But what happened because of the neural structure, perhaps, human organism could recognize this fact of hedonism, the pleasure seeking. So human being started replicating pleasure. Instead of being guided by the pleasure, we started creating pleasure. And the moment we put an effort to create pleasure, the hedonism is no more physical. It becomes psychological. So the reason for suppression of inquiry is the shift in hedonism, the shift in hedonistic behavior of human organism. It has been shifted from physical hedonism to psychological hedonism. Psychological hedonism is just an impression. There is no realistic existence of psychological hedonism prevails. So physical hedonism is a very natural movement where the pleasure and pain, with a simple example we give, we explain this. Suppose one is hungry and presented with a bunch of bananas. The first banana is very tasty, pleasurable. Second one is also too. Third one is also tasty. Fourth, perhaps also somewhat tasty. Fifth is lesser tasty. Sixth is not that much. Seventh is painful. So there's a shift. It's a sine curve. Shift in the pleasure and pain continuously. Pleasure changes into pain. Then again, pain changes into pleasure. After some time, when those six bananas are digested, again the seventh banana becomes pleasurable. So there is an interchanging of sensation that happens naturally physically and which is chemically driven. This is very important understanding, because the seventh banana and the first banana are similar in the ingredients. But even then, the first banana is pleasurable, seventh banana is painful. So it is chemically driven. The pleasure and pain basically is a chemically driven sensation. It is not externally controlled sensation unless we put an effort. So that seventh banana may become tasty if we just put some spices there. Or if we put some information in the mind that the seven bananas are very needed for the health, and you are very much convinced to go for seventh banana without observing your voice of the organism, which is real in nature. This is an external information, external knowledge that 7 bananas is healthy. 7 bananas, consumption of 7 bananas is healthy. So even though there is no hunger, I'll put a pressure onto myself and I'll end up eating it. So now, while eating it, if it is spiced up, then also, and otherwise with the influence of this kind of external knowledge, what we did is suppressing the pain without removing the cause of the pain. Naturally, what happens whenever there is a pain due to the external cause, we remove that cause. But here, due to the influence of the spice or that knowledge, we are not removing the cause of pain, rather we are suppressing the sensation of pain. And in the spicing up, there is an enhancement of pleasure from external side. So we are trying to create a pleasure. Now, pleasure is not structured to be created in nature. Pleasure is a byproduct in the process of life, which keeps on guiding the life. So this aspect needs to be understood. The physical hedonism, it's a guiding force dwelling between pleasure and pain. Now, psychological hedonism is basically an impression of pleasure, which we target. And we end up stimulating the pleasure. And whenever there is a stimulation of pleasure, there is a simultaneous suppression of pain. And both are tolls on our energy. Both are tolls on our energy. So stimulation of pleasure means there is an elongation of the duration of pleasure and the intensity of pleasure, perhaps. In both the cases, it runs on our energy. It runs basically on our energy when we try and create pleasure and suppress pain, both, without removing the cause. Naturally, we remove the cause of pain if it is identified, if it is recognized. But here the reverse thing is happening. We are blocking the sensation of pain. So in that also, there is a depletion of energy. And in this bargain, we lose the aspect of inquiry, because we are so engaged in stimulating the pleasure and suppressing the pain, we don't have any more energy left to continue our observation and inquiring journey. Now, this is $1 million question. How does unblocking happen? So I'd like to request you to observe this particular narrative. There is no can here being proposed. How can one unblock inquiry? This is not the question. How can one make it happen? This is not the question. How does it happen? If it happens. So there is a spontaneity that is being inquired here. If it is structured to happen, then how does it happen? What are the possibility of having it happen, not making it happen? There's a difference between making it happen and having it happen. Yeah, any question or any reflection till now? Yes, Sapna.
So, like you're saying, the Buddhist or the mindfulness or the Vipassana meditations are the same, but this whole spontaneous thing of it, it's just like being in self and just letting it be.
Yes.
That's how it happens. And how do you break through? Like you said, in Vipassana, I'm not talking about the technique here, but kind of like when the awareness, you bring awareness to something, it just dissipates.
Yes.
So the psychological barriers or the stagnation or the layers of perception
Yes.
that we have built up.
Yes.
So when you bring awareness to that particular perception, or it comes on its own, that's how it breaks open or just disappears.
And the very physics of it, the stagnation, the stagnation in the perception is imaginary, because the very nature of perception is dynamism.
Okay.
Perception naturally is never stagnated.
See, perception is also physiological, right? There's
Perception
P2.
is a psychological, P3.
Perception is always psychological.
Yes, yes.
So
yes.
is there a parallel molecule in the physiology? Like when they say that body memories are stored, or perception is also the memories
Yes,
of the
perception naturally is a product of sensation. Whenever the body is subject to a sensation, there will be a corresponding perception developed.
Okay.
Now,
So
that
these memories-
perception is not structured to get stagnated. It is explorative in nature. It look forward to the next set of perception, and then it by default it modifies the course of action, and all those things happen dynamically. So the very natural characteristic of perception is dynamism. It is not stationary. It is not stagnated. Because the very fact of uniqueness of moment is very much ingrained into all the organisms. All the organisms by design understands that the moments and entities in nature are unique. There is no point in stagnating any perception about any moment or any entity. For that matter, any entity in any moment. So I meet you today on the basis of this meeting. If I start sketching out your responses in tomorrow's meeting, that's a very imaginary. Because dynamically, you are also changing, I am also changing. So tomorrow, the meeting will have its own freshness. Actually, it has its own freshness. If I am under influence with the past experience of today's meeting, then I'll miss out that freshness. But that doesn't mean that freshness is not there. It is there. Structurally, it is fresh every moment. It is just I am deprived because of my stagnated perception. And that stagnated perception I am creating in my mind. It is not, again, a natural perception that I am subjecting myself to. So
when we talk about memories stored in the body, because when I was going to the Vipassana thing, there were a lot of memories that come up, or when I did a Chinese meditation thing, it was like literally, past traumatic, like they say there are traumas are stored in your body. There's a physical memory in yourself.
yes, yes.
When you're doing mindfulness, also that comes through. That is a physiological response, isn't it? P2
yes,
and
yes,
P3.
yes. So those are the knots of P3, P2 loops. Those are the loops of P3, P2 loops. Because we keep on subjecting ourselves to P3, P2, P3, P2, P3, P2, different kinds of.
Yeah.
So those knots starts unknotting from the physiology. And there is a memory of that, because every bits of perception, be it from the natural source or an imaginary source, it has an imprint in the brain. The brain is subject to the imprint. That is why the brain gets overloaded in this illusionary loops. So it has definitely a memory. And in the process of awakening of inquiry, there are unknottings. There are
But
unknotings that
you
happen.
saying there are imprints in the brain.
Yes.
But are there imprints even on the body that they say you store emotions all over your body or trauma
Yes.
all over the
Yes,
body?
the sensation is physiological, right? And
So
whenever
it
it
could be
is,
anywhere in the body.
yes, yes, whenever it is in the P3 P2 loop, that time alongside the brain imprint, there is a sensational involvement at the physiological level as well. So which also creates a memory, which you cannot deny. Just that the psychological influence can go instantly. These imprints go away, fade away slowly, perhaps. But the moment you decipher this aspect of imagination as a foundation of your suffering, you are no more having those kind of imaginations, because imaginations will drop and suffering ends. Instantly, the suffering ends. The psychological suffering ends instantly. That doesn't require any time gap or method practice, as we're discussing. Now, while understanding the awakening of inquiry, we must understand this aspect also, that the choicelessness cannot be again a goal, because it's another vicious cycle that we create. If the choicelessness becomes a choice, becomes a target, then the choicelessness cannot happen ever. The individual will be subjected to another kind of loop of targeting choicelessness. So choicelessness is a byproduct of inquiry. It is not the goal of inquiry. Inquiry is a natural state of being, and natural state of being of exploration can be possible when one is choiceless. So it's a natural characteristic. And the meaning of conditioned mind is a choice. If it is an external condition, suppose imposed one, then it is somebody's choice. I'm getting affected with that, and I'm considering that as my choice. Otherwise, the choices are coming from the own mind, and we are getting caged and conditioned again and again. So choices are the conditions. Inquiry cannot proceed when we are blind to stimulation and suppression. This is another aspect, like we often consider, for example, the food. Many times with pride, we claim that we are foodie, and we eat different kinds of taste, different cuisines, and all those claims. Where if we look deeply, if we see deeply, the cooked food are nothing but stimulated taste. It's not natural emergence. It's not tendency-based taste. It is intention-based taste. So for every cooked food, there is an intention playing to enhance the taste and lure the taste buds. And if we are blind, which conventionally you'll see, people are saying that we are leading our life to eat. Like we have to eat different cuisines. That's our goal of life, and they feel pride about it. So that means the stimulation that they are experiencing in their life, and they are volunteering themselves for those stimulations with a denial. They're not at all considering those as stimulation. Those as artificial inclusion in life. So in this particular state of being, inquiry cannot proceed, because one is overwhelmed for the stimulation and suppression. There is no more energy left for the inquiry, and both cannot go hand in hand. And if we try and understand the choices, what are choices? We find that choices are either intention to stimulate or intention to suppress. Any choice, if you pick up and you narrow down the reason why that choices got formed, we'll find that we are trying to, yes, Anita, saying something.
So this isn't it? I mean, the finding out itself is a taxing process, like simulations, the choices, and again
Yeah,
there
it
is
is.
analysis.
It could be taxing if it is happening from the ego lens. If I am trying to explore my choices, that's very taxing. But if we are just looking at the things from the truth lens, and as a whole, in general, what is choices is not taxing. Let's continue our conversation in the next session, taking a
Okay.
5 minutes break. It's few seconds are left, I see. Yeah, let's rejoin with a 5 minutes of break.